When I was in grade 12, I wanted to become the valedictorian of Block D in the University National Entrance Examination, which was a crazy dream because at that time, my scores were way below par, especially since I was struggling with mathematics. But as my teacher once told me, if people don't laugh at your dream when they hear it, you haven't dreamt big enough. And so dream big I did, and I really committed to it. I studied very hard. I even set all of my lock screens to the pictures of the previous valedictorians. I fought the losing battle. And that time, I did lose. I was not the valedictorian. In fact, I wasn't even close. So why did I do it? Well, to be honest with you, I didn't just wake up one day and decided I want to be a valedictorian out of the blue. But I've mustered up the courage to do so because I've been encouraged by a little snail. Let me introduce you to that snail. Oh, snail, little by little, climb Mount Fuji. This is a haiku poem written by Issa, which I've learned during grade 12. And these words have given me so much strength because I really saw myself in that little snail. And today, that snail is here to tell you why some battles, even those we know we might lose, are still worth fighting. Now, I'm sure you all can imagine one of the greatest mountains, high up reaching to the clouds, a beauty and grandeur. And right there, right at the very corner of the eyes, there's this tiny creature, a snail, slowly, inching its way up the mountain. Can a snail climb such a great mountain? The most probable answer is no. But the snails still keep on climbing and climbing. Maybe it's because all the joy and beauty are not in reaching the peak. It's in the climb itself. And the journey is already as enriching as the destination. And that's the first reason why. Looking back on my journey, if I hadn't set my heart on becoming a valedictorian, I would have never pushed myself beyond my comfort zone. I would have never gained the resilience, the disciplines, and the thirst for knowledge that shaped me. I would have never stumbled upon this little snail that has taught me one of the most valuable lessons of my 17. Aim for the moon, because even if you miss, you'll land among the stars. So, I've reckoned that it's the way we choose to view a failed goal, not as a shameful weakness, but rather as a learning and growing progress that can transform the journey from something burdening into something rewarding. And it's this very mindset that will allow us to walk the long road with joy and persistence. And this is actually supported by science as well. In the prominent work of Dr. Carol Dweck at Stanford University, through studies spanning 3 decades involving hundreds of students across America, she found out that the way we choose to view our mistakes and failures have a significant impact on our mentality and our performance. In one study, they taught students that every time they pushed out of their comfort zone and try to learn something really, really hard, and they stick to it, the neurons in their brain could form new and strong connection. And over time, they would become smarter. Those who were taught this lesson, the experimental group, showed a sharp increase in their performance, while those who did not showed a decline. So, the next time you're faced with fear of failures, try not to think about it as a verdict of your own lackings, but rather as a valuable experience of learning and growing, and that these learnings will accompany you in a very long journey ahead. And this leads me into my second reason why I think you should fight a losing battle. That is, your inner self-growth. You know, one of the reasons that me, as well as many other people, used to be held back from pursuing our dreams was the thought that our efforts would lead to nowhere, or it would not create something significant enough. Or maybe it's because there are already so many talented individuals out there to do the job, so why even try? Just like how the journey of the snail just casually fades into the background, with no one noticing, let alone admiring. But then once again, I can see that the snail is still climbing slowly and consistently. And it struck me that the snail did not try to climb to the top of the mountain so that people could look up to it and admire it and gain acknowledgement. But it tried to climb to the top of the mountain so that it could be able to witness and admire the world. Because every inch forward gave it a glimpse of a world beyond what it has ever known. Had it stayed in the same spot, in a small well, it would have never known the beauty from the mountain. Just like if I hadn't embarked on my own journey in pursuit of the highest title, in arguably the biggest exam nationwide, my mindsets and worldview wouldn't be as enriched and refined as they are now. So why bother whether our efforts are significant enough for the world or not, when it's already so significant to our own inner growth? And when I talk about self-growth, I'm not just talking about mindsets and worldview, but I also want to talk about self-appreciation. You know, contrary to the belief that failures would diminish our self-confidence and our self-esteem, through my journey, I actually learned the appreciation of self more deeply than ever. Before I decided to pursue my dreams, I used to believe that I couldn't, and therefore shouldn't do it. And because I didn't support myself doing it, I automatically think that other people wouldn't support me doing it as well. And that's how I became the first person to reject myself. But as I learned to just focus on my journey, I started to notice that every little small gains and growth along the way and appreciate my own efforts. I started to become proud of myself, of how much I've learned, how hard I've tried, and how brave I was for actually doing it. And as my perception of self changed, I've also noticed something very important. Remember the little snail that I've introduced you to? Well, I began to look back on that little poem, and I started to question, has no one ever truly noticed the small snail? And then I figured it out. The answer is no. There was indeed one person who noticed the tiny yet consistent efforts of the snail. That was the poet. And so it dawned on me that our efforts, no matter how small and vain we think it might be, there would always be a kind and jeering eyes who may, in silence, notice, appreciate, and cherish our tiny step forward. For me, that person was my teacher, the one who always believes in my potential. And more recently, as I began auditioning for TEDx, I was once again moved by the love and support of those around me, even from people whom I've rarely talked to before. A senior of mine from school actually reached out to me, saying that she would love to use my video as an illustration for another TEDx event that she was coaching. And so, even when my growth alone was enough for me to feel proud, I honestly think that no efforts is ever vain and little, but they would always be welcomed and valued by the kind people around us. So, what if I tell you that we're sometimes more self-critical than what other people may think of us, and thus the fear of judgment held us back from doing the things we've always wanted to. But if we just take a step out of our shells, maybe our hearts would be warmed by the supportiveness of those around us. Let me illustrate. If there's anybody in the audience that has something that they could take away from my speech today, could you please give me a round of applause? Thank you. Thank you so much. Your wonderful support has been a great pleasure of mine in this journey, one that, if I never try, I may never know. And I shall keep all the love and supportiveness and appreciation I've received in my heart and in my mind the next time I fight a losing battle. So, through my speech, I hope you can see that. 1. The point of fighting a losing battle is not really about the destination, but rather the progress. So just enjoy every step of the way instead of letting the goals burden you. And 2, it's not really about recognition either, but rather about discovery, enlightenment, and self-growth. So you're not losing, you're gaining. And lastly, fighting a losing battle is not something to be embarrassed about or to be discouraged by. But for me, it has been a journey of self-appreciation. It has taught me to never be the first person to reject myself and to learn that my efforts would always be welcome and valued. And this is my attempt to convince you to fight a battle that you've always wanted to, but scared of losing. By that, I don't mean to say that you should always throw yourself out there or push yourself to the limits. But what I'm trying to say is that if you only ever fight the battles that you know for sure you're gonna win, maybe you miss out on a lot of the beauty that only comes from fighting a losing battle. So I hope that this speech of mine finds you at the right time to remind you that your fear is as big as your potential and somehow urges you to take a leap of faith and for once fight a losing battle. Thank you.